Like all horrible things, this journey started out on Twitter. Someone I follow was like, "What's your least favorite magical girl show?" And my answer was obvious, but a mutual of mine answered with something I had never heard of before. Kagehime Monogatari Ekyou Alice Rondo. Curious, I looked it up and could instantly feel the early 2000s energy radiating off of it like it was the elephant's foot. But that didn't tell me anything about the actual quality of the show. Over the next couple of weeks, I saw more discussion of Alice Rondo, and my curiosity eventually led me to this. Because I could feel it in my bones, how uniquely bad this was. How it was flawed in ways I had never seen before. And this is my journey down the rabbit hole because I needed to study this thing under a microscope. So, starting in 2004, the manga of Kagehime Monogatari Ekyou Alice Rondo, which I will now refer to simply as Eternal Alice because that's easier to say, released chapters in the Dengeki Daio magazine. It is written by Kaishaku, which is a manga duo consisting of Hitoshi Ota and Terumasa Shikinohe. They've written a lot of stories, and I'm unfamiliar with most of them, but Barry-chan, the mutual who introduced me to Eternal Alice Curse You, is much more familiar. As of now, the manga of Eternal Alice has not been translated into English. No fan translations and no official translations. I know this because I tried to find the manga to compare it and all that, and I just couldn't find anything in English. I mentioned this to Barry, and they confirmed that it's never been translated into English. They could translate it, but that would mean they have to read it, and I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. So, let's get this over with. Also, pardon if this video is a bit scuffed. I'm trying to move at the moment, and I don't have the hard drive with my video assets, so thank you for understanding. Aruto Kirihara is a young man who adores the Alice novels, written by a man named Alternate L. Takion. Aruto is so enamored with them that he decides to write his own third entry. While doing so one night, he sees a girl flying through the sky who's the spitting image of his own Alice. From there, he's thrown into a world of magic and wonder, quite literally, as he learns about Alice Seekers and Wonderland spaces. There's a rumor that Takion actually wrote a secret third Alice novel called The Eternal Alice, but it was never published. Aruto is told by Arisu, the girl he saw, that fragments of the novel are within the stories of each Alice Seeker. So they battle each other in the Wonderland spaces to steal each other's stories, putting their own on the line, all with the hope of having their wish granted by the Eternal Alice, because it can do that. Every episode opens with a monologue talking about girls who put their stories on the line and how they fight each other with hopes of completing the Eternal Alice, and oh my god, this is a death game. I feel insane saying this. I don't think I processed how stupid this all is. But a silly premise doesn't actually mean anything about the quality of a show. A lot of stories, especially anime, sound completely insane when you try to explain them, but while watching them, you feel immersed within that world and its logic. That ain't the case here. In terms of looks, this show feels particularly cheap. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but considering the ending looks like this, it's safe to say that the animation budget wasn't all that great. Not to mention, it uses a lot of shortcuts to get around actually showing anything happening. You know what I mean. Short animation loops, cutting away and playing a sound effect when complicated movement is happening. Frankly, it feels like the most anything is animated are... Yeah, it's that kind of show. And the school uniforms are hideous. Dude, So, this is a personal gripe, but it's kind of frustrating how vague the story is about Alice. Like, obviously, it's talking about Alice's adventures in Wonderland, written by Lewis Carroll in 1865. And then he wrote a sequel with Through the Looking Glass in 1871. But why are they so vague? Why does the story just say the Alice novels? Nobody calls them that. Alice in Wonderland was absolutely public domain at this point. Why did they change the name of the author? It's not like fictionalized versions of historical figures is anything new to storytelling. I spent so long being baffled by this point just because. Huh? Each episode, we cut to the villains at some point talking, despite the fact that they don't actually really do all that much. I don't get these guys. We have two little girls, Author Man, who's evil, I think, and the librarian that is specifically showcased in episode 1 to let the audience know she's important, but then she never shows up as the librarian ever again. So what was the point of this? This show is very much a product of its time, as pretty much all of the characters fall into very obvious tropes. And there's nothing wrong with tropes, but when you write, you have to write a character, not a trope. Aruto Kirihara is our protagonist, making him one of the few male leads in magical girl stories. Though I think it's mainly for harem reasons rather than anything else. In terms of personality, he likes Alice in Wonderland, and he likes writing. And aside from that, he's just sort of a vaguely generic harem protagonist. This applies to basically all of the cast. I do find it interesting, however, because this is an era and genre of anime that I largely do not have any experience with. Both the harem aspect as well as the whole male protagonist acts as an observer to magical girls doing magical things thing. Aruto has the special ability to write stories. The second time he sees a person's story being taken from them, he yoinks it from Kiraha's hand and asks for a pen and paper. After some miraculously appears, he starts copying the story and gives the original back to its owner. What bothers me is that this is such an obvious solution. Like, duh, copy it. There doesn't seem to be a hard time limit on how long someone remains in the Wonderland spaces after their story is taken. I think the explanation is normally a copy of someone's stories wouldn't have the same power as the original. Because when Arisu first takes the pages he wrote, she gets like a flash in her mind of the story, but it's not clear, and it's really funny how all the characters are amazed at Aruto's astounding ability to write words on paper. Not writing an original story, copying words from one paper to another. It is funny, though, how the explanation is that Aruto loved the Alice novels so much that he just copied them over and over as a kid, and now he's just really good at copying things super fast. That's fun. Arisu, Arisugawa, what a name, is girl and love interest. And before anything else, her transformation scene sucks. Like boobs, butt, feet, hands, and bam, she's done, all outfits all complete. What was that? Where's the magic? This is really making me want to do magical girl transformation reviews, oh my lord. Anyway, she does have the most bearable personality of the whole cast. She can be a bit silly, serious, happy, and kind. There's this part where she notices that Kiriha is getting jealous that Aruto is happy around Arisu, and Arisu sort of makes a game out of it. Her reason for collecting parts of the Eternal Alice are just so that she can read it. The gang didn't even know about the whole wish thing until episode 3, which could say a lot about her as a character. Her motivations for putting her story on the line just so she can read a book. But for the most part, she's mainly just a companion to Aruto, and that is by design. However, the design is... oh boy. Kiraa. She's Aruto's little sister. And with my previous comments about this being a vague harem anime, you can see where this is going. No! I am not doing that joke. It is overused and Alabama is so cool for so many reasons. Educate yourselves. She's just the clingy, kind of annoying little sister who needs to lay off her brother. There are times where she actively gets in the way and puts others in danger because she wants to be the one to protect her brother or is trying to prove a point or something. It's so frustrating. Her whole deal is that she's in love with her brother because ill, and she's jealous he likes another girl. But eventually they become friends or something. There isn't really a clear progression of this relationship, it just sort of happens. Kiraa has her best friend, Kisa. Kisa is the psychotic lesbian trope, and not in a fun way. This is just a creepy way. It's so weird. She doesn't actually do too much in the story. Episode 2, Kisa notices that Kiraa is sad because Big Brother spends more time with Arisu, and Kisa hates anything that makes Kiraa sad, so she doesn't like Arisu. Side tangent, but Alice users use these little Alice-themed tea party things to challenge each other to fights. Arisu got an invitation, so she sent it to Aruto so he would know where to go to find her. He and Kiraa go running off while Kisa is visiting them, and she finds an invitation on the ground, which I assumed was the one that we just saw being read and telling Aruto to go to a certain place at that exact time because, you know, it's a pretty useful trope. Character runs off, dropping something that tells another character where they're going so they can show up dramatically and stumble into the magical situation or whatever. I don't know, but apparently it was wrong of me to expect something straightforward from this story because instead, Kisa goes to the library the next night and talks with a disembodied voice who makes her an Alice seeker, which, considering she acts like they've talked before, we can assume this was who was in the bushes at the beginning of the episode, and Anyway, that's why Kisa's an Alice seeker. She wanted to throw down with Arisu for making Kiraa sad. And this little voice is never explained. I don't know what any of this means. Kirika is the best character. Girl shows up, does harem bait because that's what this show is, and then she just shows up whenever the hell she wants. Moves in across the street to observe Aruto. She randomly appears in their house. Normally I would think this is super creepy, but considering, you know, everything else, she's just funny and I love her. Girl wakes up and decides to make it everyone else's problem. Her transformation makes her a little girl, and she says that it's because of her childhood, which is so hilariously self-aware, and also she has a fear of fire. So we learn that her tragic backstory is she had a friend as a kid, and they were both Alice seekers. They were playing hide and seek at a church, and the friend hid inside of a coffin that was just there and open and empty for some reason. Kirika was gonna play a simple joke and locked the coffin, but then some people came into the church and Kirika hid for some reason, and they picked up the coffin and cremated it with the friend inside, which, that's not how cremation works! I watch Ask a Mortician, so I know that ain't how it goes, which is true, because apparently the friend, Lorena, didn't die at all. She was rescued, but she was pissed off at Kirika, so they weren't friends anymore. So, to get over the shock of losing her friend, Kirika fabricated the belief that Lorena died due to her actions to cope with her friend being mad at her. I don't know, man, that situation sounds a little backwards to me. Also, regardless, how come there was just a random empty coffin chilling in a church, and how come these guys were going to burn it? Nothing about any aspect of the story makes any sense. What is happening? Kirika does get to sucker punch a bitch, and I deeply respect that. Before moving forward, if you're enjoying, then please leave a like and subscribe. And comment once you've finished the video. If you want to support me more directly, I also have a Patreon. Still trying to figure that one out, but I'm grateful for any support. You can also follow me on these other platforms. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get back to whatever this is. The basic structure for the story is the characters just kind of doing whatever. They fight a random Alice Seeker who never shows up again, and until the halfway point, that's kind of it. It's pretty episodic for the most part, and what carries an episodic series are the characters and their dynamics together. But when your dynamics are bland protag who's just so amazing and selfless, his obnoxious little sister who's possessive of her brother because she wants to kiss him, the best romance option by virtue of being just as bland and not his goddamn sister, and the other characters who just kind of hang around waiting to be relevant, those dynamics aren't gonna be good. This is something else that bothers me, but we're never given a measure of how complete the Eternal Alice is. Like, you set up a goal for your story. Collect the fragments of a novel in order to complete it and get a wish. Okay, cool. But when you set up a collective goal like that, you need to provide the audience with something to measure the progress against. In Dragon Ball, we're told you need all 7 Dragon Balls to make a wish, so we as an audience can track the progress of the characters. I don't know why I use that as an example. I've never seen Dragon Ball, but you know what I mean. It's just like, at the end, the baddie is like, haha, we have all the Alice fragments here. It's like, do we? 'Cause I don't know. I'm frankly stuck as to how to properly explore just how everything is done wrong here. One of the funniest parts of the whole show is this one girl who apparently has a supernaturally bad sense of direction, and after she sets the siblings' house on fire because she hates Alice, Best Girl shows up and is like, oh, she should be fighting the Anderson Seekers. I'm sorry, Anderson Seekers? As in Hans Christian Andersen? That's confirmed in her flashback where we see her reading The Little Match Girl, and you can't just throw that out there! I thought there was something special and magical about the Alice novels, but no! Apparently to this, there are just magical girls for every author's books! Do I get to choose my contract? What do you think, gang? Should I be a Poe Seeker, a Doll Seeker, or a Rorden Seeker? Also, ghosts are real and can be Alice Seekers, I think. Something mystery building up with Tachyon. I don't know if this review makes any sense. This show moves so goddamn fast, I don't even know where to begin. Mostly, it just doesn't explain anything. A story doesn't have to 100% explain every single tiny detail. Some things can be speculated on or a mystery, but not like basic active elements to your story. As the story goes on, Alice becomes less of a name and more of a title, as all of these girls are sort of implied to be their own individual versions of Alice. But it doesn't ever explore what that means. What are the Alice Seekers? How do they work? What is it that adds parts of the Eternal Alice to a girl's story? Though thinking about the ending, what defines these stories? From what we see, a person's story seems to just be a single memory that is significant in some way, not that we ever get any context for them. I have not read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland personally, but through pop culture osmosis, I have a surface-level understanding of it and its metaphors. There could be something interesting here, each Alice Seeker having their own personal adventure through their own wonderland, learning to better understand themselves and the world around them, but that's not what happens at all. By the end of this show, the syllables that come together to form the name Alice have stopped meaning anything. This is one of those shows that likes to randomly drop deeply unsettling information on the viewer and then just moves on. Episode 8 opens up with Kiraa having a dream where Aruto is also into her, and she wakes up all sad, and then we cut to the villain for the next 2 episodes, whose power is essentially just trauma. She triggers people's trauma. That's how Kirika discovers that her friend she thought died didn't actually die, but she was so traumatized by her friend being mad at her, she deluded herself into thinking she died. Anyway, how did this lady know about Kiraa's dream? Did she cause the dream? Can she view the hearts of others or... whatever. But this lady shows up at school. Her name is Asuka, and she's like,
"How do you do, fellow kids?"
and joins the team. She walks home with Kiraa and calls her out for being into her brother because, as it turns out, instead of being a gross little side plot line, the incest becomes the focus of the whole story! Episode 6, the gang get trapped in a super weird Wonderland space and eventually meet Takion, who's the author of the novels, but the most important thing is that to get Aruto out of a cage, he and Arisu had to kiss, like in the books. Kiraa discovers this and gets jealous and petty about it, and that's when everything spirals. I don't understand this lady. She says things like, if you want the story to be beautiful, you gotta remove the ugly parts. And sometimes to save someone, you have to take their story. Asuka is so baffling. What is her deal? She seems to take some kind of sadistic glee in the suffering she causes others, and there isn't any resolution with her. She's just evil for funsies, I guess. Hey, I don't know how I forgot to mention this, but content warning. For child sexual assault, go to this timestamp. This show is garbage. I also don't know where else to put this, but the most shocking thing for me was episode 8. The gang meets up and they fight an Alice Seeker who freaks out upon seeing Aruto, saying things about how men are all disgusting and evil. Evil lady shows up, stabs her with a magic feather, and we see that her story is her as a kid being pushed on a swing by an older adult, and then he says this, and oh my god. Oh my god, what the hell? Like, actually, what the fuck? So, it's revealed at the end that Arisu is, in fact, Aruto's Alice OC, and he created her as a replacement for his sister because he is also in love with his sister, not as her brother, but as a man, which, ew. Also, this is the funniest shit. Oh my lord.
アルト君が本当に好きなのはキラハちゃん。そうでしょ。
キラーは僕の妹だよ。好きだなんてそんな。
If Aruto chose Kiraa over Arisu, then Arisu would cease to exist. In response, Aruto basically becomes catatonic because he has the constitution of a sickly Victorian noble, and having to decide between loving his OC and his own goddamn sister is just too much for him. Arisu is disappointed and tries to disappear, but Takion appears randomly and has Arisu frozen in a crystal book. And it's time to complete the Eternal Alice because Takion is all, we have all the stories and I knew you'd be the final ones. And again, we have nothing to compare this to. Kiraa and Kisa have to fight. Kisa gives up her story. And when Kiraa is like, Oni-chan, you have to copy her story, he says no, because he can't write stories anymore. He's so traumatized over, I don't know, being in love with his sister that he can't copy words on paper anymore. there's some kind of nightmare sequence, and then Aruto sees the memories of Takion and Liddell, and I hate this. I hate this. Oh god! But on the bright side, Liddell does turn on him, not because she realizes how creepy and fucked up their relationship is, though. Okay, this doesn't make any sense, but I'll do my best to explain it. Oh god. Liddell, the librarian, who, remember, was a thing before, but then didn't appear in the rest of the show except as by Takion's side, so whatever. Liddell is Alice. She knew Takion since she was a child, and he was some aspect of her life. Oh god, I want to vom. But after the first 2 Alice novels were written, he stopped telling her stories, even though she kept asking. And apparently it was an established pattern that he would, quote, throw away girls once he got bored. That's what happened with the ghost girl earlier. So she made up the story about the eternal Alice and Alice Seekers, and then Takion added on the Wonderland spaces and the whole wish thing. Because he just kind of casually throws out, yeah, the eternal Alice can grant a wish, and we could wish to be immortal. Wouldn't that be neat? And then Liddell says Takion had run out of creative energy after the first 2 books, and she was searching for someone to replace him. And then she kills him? I don't know, it looked like he rapidly aged and turned to dust, so I think he was only alive for so long because of the Wonderland space. So basically, creepy relationship, girl gets upset Takion has writer's block, makes up a little story to inspire him, he just kind of goes off the deep end, and now Liddell wants somebody to take his place. I don't know. Aruto gets over his trauma, something about Arisu really did exist, and he's writing her story, or something. Arisu breaks free, and she fights alongside Kiraa against Liddell. All the Alices decide to stay in the Wonderland space, and Arisu is like, you can visit me anytime you like, by reading his book, and the show is over, and thank God. Oh my lord. This show is hilarious. It's bad, but bad in such a fascinating and unique way that almost makes it worth the watch. I don't do drinking games, mainly because I don't drink, but my god, this is a perfect candidate for one. I truly don't know how else to describe my experience watching this show other than a constant stream of confusion and bad ideas. Its only redeeming quality is how hilariously bad it is. And some of the character designs are charming in that 2000s anime way. Also, half the girls in the ending don't even show up, and that makes me mad. Go read Pandora Hearts, you'll have a better time.